Royal galas are usually known for their elegance, traditions, and carefully planned moments. Guests arrive in sparkling gowns and suits, the royal orchestra plays softly, and the evening moves forward with toasts, polite laughter, and official speeches. Everything is organized to perfection, and surprises are rare. But on one unforgettable evening, a surprise did happen. And it came from someone the world least expected: Princess Charlotte. At just a young age, she stepped forward and took the microphone with quiet confidence. What followed was a heartfelt and bold speech that left the entire audience stunned, including Queen Camilla herself. It wasn't only the words she spoke, but the way she delivered them with courage, sincerity, and wisdom far beyond her years. The gala, which had begun like any other night of royal tradition, suddenly transformed into a historic moment that people would talk about for years to come. No amount of planning or preparation could have predicted how the youngest voice in the room would become the strongest one, proving that sometimes history is written not by kings or queens, but by those brave enough to speak from the heart. The evening started with all the usual grandeur. Long banquet tables were decorated with crystal glasses that reflected the soft glow of candlelight. Chandeliers shone overhead, casting golden light across the ballroom walls. Royal banners swayed gently near tall windows, adding to the feeling of pride and tradition. King Charles and Queen Camilla sat at the head table, keeping their royal poise. Prince William and Princess Catherine arrived with grace, and their children followed quietly, dressed perfectly for the occasion. Princess Charlotte wore a powder blue gown that sparkled in the light, making her appear like a figure from a fairy tale. But while the room buzzed with polite chatter, there was also a feeling of tension that few could explain. Everyone expected the evening to go exactly as planned: official speeches, applause, and entertainment. Yet under the surface, there was an energy building, the kind that makes moments feel bigger than they first appear. The audience didn't know it yet, but something extraordinary was about to happen. Something that would shift the focus away from kings and queens and onto a young girl ready to show her strength. The gala that turned into history. Royal galas are often remembered for their beauty, traditions, and glamorous appearances. Guests from high society arrive in sparkling gowns and tailored suits, and every detail is planned so that the evening unfolds without mistakes. The orchestra plays, champagne glasses clink, and speeches are usually polite, carefully written, and predictable. But at one unforgettable gala, something different happened, something unplanned, unscripted, and powerful. Princess Charlotte, still so young and not yet expected to carry the weight of royal responsibility, walked to the microphone and began to speak. Her words weren't long, but they were deep, bold, and heartfelt. In that moment, she showed bravery that stunned everyone in the room, including Queen Camilla, who was left completely speechless. What made the moment so incredible was not only that Charlotte spoke, but that she spoke with wisdom and compassion beyond her years. The gala, which had begun like any other event filled with elegance and tradition, was transformed into history. The youngest voice in the room became the one that carried the most strength, reminding everyone that sometimes the future announces itself in the most unexpected way. The evening itself began with all the usual grandeur expected at a royal gala. Banquet tables stretched across the ballroom, glowing under chandeliers that hung like crowns of light. The tables were decorated with crystal glasses, silver cutlery, and candlelight that flickered gently across the polished surfaces. Guests whispered politely to one another, their voices blending with the sound of violins playing in the background. At the head of the room sat King Charles and Queen Camilla, showing their usual royal composure. Prince William and Princess Catherine entered with their children, and, as always, all eyes followed them. Charlotte looked graceful in her powder blue gown, which shimmered like morning frost, catching the light every time she moved. While the gala was filled with glamour and excitement, there was also an unspoken tension, as if something unusual was about to unfold. Normally, such evenings go exactly as planned, with no surprises. Yet beneath the careful schedule and polished appearances, something more meaningful was preparing to take place. The audience did not know it, But the spotlight was soon to shift to the youngest member of the royal family. And what she would do next would change the tone of the night completely. Everything followed its normal rhythm, until the master of ceremonies stepped forward, holding the evening's program in his hands. He announced something not originally included: a short address from Her Royal Highness, Princess Charlotte of Wales. The room rippled with surprise. Guests glanced at one another, whispering in disbelief. Even Queen Camilla raised her eyebrows, caught off guard. King Charles leaned forward, curious, while Princess Catherine placed a gentle hand on Charlotte's back as if to steady her. Prince William, though clearly proud, also showed the cautious expression of a father who understood the weight of every word his daughter might speak. Slowly, Charlotte rose from her seat. The quiet scrape of her chair against the marble floor echoed in the silent room. She walked toward the podium with calm steps, her small figure commanding attention in a hall filled with seasoned leaders, celebrities, and dignitaries. When she reached the microphone, she didn't speak right away. Instead, she scanned the room with her steady eyes, creating a silence so powerful it felt almost ceremonial. The gala was no longer simply a performance of royal tradition, it was now a moment of raw anticipation. When Charlotte finally began to speak, the words came without hesitation. She didn't rely on note cards or a teleprompter. Instead, she spoke from memory, from her heart, and with a clarity that felt extraordinary for someone so young. She began with a simple but meaningful story about kindness, of how even the smallest acts can create ripples of change far beyond what anyone can see. She spoke about children whose struggles are often ignored, and about charities that quietly work every day without asking for recognition. Her voice was calm, her words deliberate, and her tone filled with sincerity. The audience leaned forward, captivated not by the glamour of the event, but by the authenticity of her message. For that moment, she wasn't just the daughter of a future king, she was a leader in her own right, speaking on behalf of those who were rarely heard. Her youth seemed irrelevant, replaced instead by a strength of presence that filled the hall. By the time she reached the middle of her speech, it was clear to everyone present that this was no passing whim. It was the first glimpse of a royal voice with the potential to shape the future. Princess Charlotte's sudden bravery at the gala didn't come out of nowhere. For years, William and Catherine had been raising their children with a balance of tradition and modern values. Instead of simply teaching them to smile for the cameras and wave at crowds, they encouraged them to understand real life beyond the palace walls. Charlotte had often visited hospitals, schools, and charities with her parents, learning not just to appear, but to listen. She asked questions about people's lives, why they struggled, and how they found hope. These experiences shaped her empathy and gave her words weight. She had also grown up watching her parents talk about responsibility, duty, and compassion. From her father, she learned about balancing leadership with humility. From her mother, she learned about independence, kindness, and strength. These lessons prepared her for moments like this, even if no one expected them so soon. By the time she walked to the podium, she wasn't just a child in a pretty gown. She was a young royal who had quietly been preparing for this kind of moment her whole life. The gala speech was simply the first time the world got to see it. As Charlotte's speech continued, the atmosphere in the room shifted completely. At first, guests had been politely curious, unsure of what to expect. But soon they found themselves holding their breath, completely absorbed by her words. She spoke about hope in times of hardship, about kindness that costs nothing but means everything, and about the importance of supporting one another, even in the darkest times. Then, with surprising sensitivity, she made subtle references to her own family's struggles. The whispers about her mother's health, her grandfather, King Charles's treatments. She didn't mention names, but her meaning was clear. Even the royal family faces challenges, just like every other family. And through these trials, they too must lean on kindness, love, and hope. This honesty struck deeply with the audience. It made Charlotte's words not just powerful, but relatable. By the time she finished, polite applause was no longer enough. The entire room rose in a standing ovation. Queen Camilla, normally composed and reserved, was left visibly moved and without words. Even she could not hide her surprise at the impact of the young princess's speech. For Queen Camilla, the moment carried unexpected weight. She had entered the gala prepared for another evening of polite smiles and formal speeches. But as Charlotte spoke, her calm composure began to shift. Observers noted her lips pressed into a tight line, her fingers curling slightly around her glass. Every word Charlotte spoke seemed to reach her, cutting through layers of protocol and years of royal routine. When the applause finally erupted, Camilla remained seated for a moment longer than everyone else, deep in thought. Eventually, she stood, offering a smile that seemed quieter than before, measured, reflective, perhaps even unsettled. Later that evening, she left the gala earlier than expected, avoiding the press and offering only a brief nod to Charlotte in passing. For many watching, her reaction raised questions. Was she proud, surprised, or did Charlotte's words strike a deeper chord, reminding her that the next generation of royals might carry a very different kind of influence? Whatever the truth, the night left her visibly shaken. A rare sight for someone, usually so controlled. By the next morning, Charlotte's speech had spread across the world. Clips flooded social media, with hashtags trending and headlines praising her courage. Journalists who had attended the gala admitted to being caught off guard, describing the speech as one of the most genuine royal moments in recent history. Teachers played the speech in classrooms as an example of empathy and leadership. Charity workers and hospital staff praised her for giving a voice to people often forgotten. Donations to certain charities she mentioned even increased overnight. Social media users replayed the video countless times, focusing on her calm delivery, her subtle glance at Queen Camilla, and her simple but powerful words. Even a small voice can make a difference. For the public, this was more than a charming royal moment. It was proof that the monarchy still had the ability to inspire and connect with ordinary people. Some even compared Charlotte to Princess Diana, not for style or fashion, but for the courage to speak truth with compassion. In the weeks that followed, Charlotte's speech continued to spark discussion. Inside the palace, advisors debated how much freedom she should be allowed in the future. Some feared her boldness introduced unpredictability into the carefully managed royal image, while others celebrated it as a step toward a more modern, relatable monarchy. For Charlotte herself, life carried on quietly, but with a new sense of purpose. Invitations poured in for youth forums, charity events, and public gatherings, all eager to hear her voice again. Yet William and Catherine chose restraint, reminding her that true leadership is not about performance, but about consistency and empathy. Over time, her gala speech came to be remembered as more than just a surprising moment. It was the beginning of a legacy. It showed that real influence is not inherited but earned, not through titles or crowns, but through courage, honesty, and compassion. Princess Charlotte had stepped forward as a child, but she spoke like a leader. And in doing so, she reminded the world that even the smallest voices can echo the loudest, shaping history in ways no one could predict. Within the walls of the palace, Charlotte's speech quickly became the subject of quiet conversations. Staff, who had served the monarchy for decades, admitted they had never seen anything quite like it. Normally, royal children are carefully shielded from the pressures of public expectation until they are much older. Yet Charlotte had stood confidently on one of the most visible stages imaginable. For King Charles, the moment was deeply personal. Reports later suggested that he was both proud and emotional, seeing in his granddaughter the same spark that once defined his late former wife, Princess Diana. Prince William and Princess Catherine, meanwhile, balanced their pride with a sense of protectiveness. They knew that such a powerful moment could set expectations for Charlotte's future. And while they admired her courage, they wanted her to grow without the crushing weight of constant comparison. Behind closed doors, discussions arose about how best to guide her public role, ensuring that she could continue to speak from the heart without being forced into the rigid mold of tradition too soon. The gala speech had not only touched the public, it had also redefined how the royal family themselves viewed their youngest members. Charlotte's bold step onto the stage raised larger questions about what it means to be part of the next generation of royals. For decades, the monarchy